The heroic epic Beowulf emigrated long ago from southern Sweden to England. It travelled, preserved in oral traditions, along with Jutes, Angles and Saxons, who began arriving in the 5th century CE. Somewhere between the 8th and 10th centuries CE, it was finally set down in writing. The one manuscript surviving to this day narrowly escaped a 17th century fire. Beowulf's plot is basically a trilogy of adventures, in which the titular hero confronts a giant troll-like creature, then its monstrous mother, and finally, decades later, a freshly wakened and vengeful dragon. Rich in atmosphere, the poem also devotes plenty of time to celebrations, feasts, and almost a dozen anecdotes or references to earlier Germanic legends or dramatic historical events. The poem's main character, Beowulf, is a young travelling warrior from Geatland. At times just called the Geat, he fits the template established by epic heroes of earlier literature, a man eager to win fame and be sung about by bards, even beyond his own lifetime. Like Gilgamesh, Achilles, Hector and Arjuna, he is bigger and stronger than ordinary men, but, as King Hrothgar warns him in the poem, still fated to die one day, just as they were. Like Gilgamesh and Odysseus, Beowulf is destined to encounter huge, powerful monsters that regular warriors prove no match for. In his first adventure, triggered by obligations, Beowulf goes to the Danish court whose mead hall is plagued by the troll-like giant Grendel, nemesis of wise King Hrothgar. He ambushes, then mortally wounds this monstrous attacker, and the maimed Grendel flees to the marshes where he dies. After which Beowulf is feasted and proclaimed a hero by the Danish king. But he is soon pressed back into action when Grendel's mother, a fearsome, formidable water woman, eager to avenge the killing of her son, attacks while Beowulf is lodged elsewhere. Later, Beowulf and his team track her to a lake, and the hero, fighting off water monsters, dives to the bottom and corners her in a cavern, where, after a closely contested duel, he slays her too. His status as an immortal hero now assured, amid feasting and celebrations, he hears the Scops, or historian bards of the court, sing of his deeds. But Hrothgar reminds him of his mortality. 50 years go by, during which Beowulf, naturally lauded for his heroic achievements, becomes king of the Geats, his own people. But in true epic fashion, no peaceful end awaits him. When a slave steals a cup from a dragon's hoard, the creature leaves its lair and begins burning the surrounding countryside in revenge, forcing King Beowulf out of retirement. And when the now grey-bearded warrior begins to lose in single combat against the fire-breathing monster, all but one of his men, who were waiting in reserve, panic and desert him. Beowulf and the loyal Wiglaf at last succeed in slaying the beast, but in the process, Beowulf is mortally wounded and breathes his last with only the heartbroken Wiglaf at his side. The poem predicts that in the light of so much cowardice, and with their legendary hero king now gone, invasion and conquest by fiercer, braver enemies will surely be the fate of Geatland. Oxford professor J.R.R. Tolkien, celebrated author of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, was also a philologist who lectured on Anglo-Saxon and Middle English, and, famously, analysed Beowulf in depth. Tolkien interpreted Beowulf as a pre-Christian poem, with some Christian details added later, likely written by a Christian who viewed the pre-Christian past with affectionate nostalgia. The hero's main enemies, trolls and dragons, Tolkien defined as beasts from Germanic mythology associated with cold, dark and the wild, bleak lands from which those peoples came. The author himself, in creating the heroes and sagas of Middle-earth, employed these patterns he understood so well from Beowulf, blending Christian and pre-Christian elements in his work. Beowulf's death, following his final clash with the dragon, aligns perfectly with classic Germanic mythology about the human world's inevitable end, such as the Viking apocalypse Ragnarok. Faithful Wiglaf, who alone stands beside the aged hero in his last battle, serves to remind us that heroism holds communities together and is itself maintained and inspired through loyalty. When the poem digresses from plot action to become more reflective, it gives timeless warnings that behavior arising from pride, anger, and oath-breaking will destroy any society. Modern readers can take the epic's monsters as symbols for those dark forces that lurk outside the bounds of human community, devoid of our songs, our feasts, and our oaths to each other. In some ways, Beowulf marks a transition point in literature, for during the medieval age, epics about extraordinary people and their deeds were to give way to more universal, typically human stories.
Having now surveyed the tale of the West's last great epic hero, be sure to also journey with the super-powered warrior king whose quest started it all in our mortality-defying Episode 1.